When I arrived at my daughter's luxury wedding, my son-in-law's rich family forced me to sit beside the trash can. Your poverty embarrasses our good manners. Suddenly, a man in a $30,000 suit approached me and said, "Act like you're with me." When my son-in-law saw us together, he froze. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I should have known something was wrong the moment I walked into the Fairmont Grand Ballroom. The chandeliers cast golden light over marble floors so polished I could see my reflection, and flower arrangements that probably cost more than my monthly rent filled every corner. Everything screamed luxury, everything except my presence. I stood in the doorway wearing my only good suit, the navy blue one I'd bought at JCPenney 3 years ago for my nephew's funeral. It was clean, pressed, and the best I could afford on my janitor's salary. But as I looked around at the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, I felt like a stain on expensive fabric. "Excuse me, sir." A woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a clipboard approached me. Her smile was the kind they teach in customer service training, bright but empty. "Are you with the catering staff?" My stomach dropped. "No, I'm Carlton Miller. I'm the bride's father." Her smile faltered for just a second before snapping back into place. "Oh, of course. Let me check the seating chart." She flipped through her papers with the urgency of someone trying to solve an embarrassing problem. "Ah, here we are. You're at table. Well, it's right over here." She led me through the grand ballroom, past tables draped in ivory silk and adorned with centerpieces that reached toward the ceiling. Each table had a number written in elegant calligraphy. 1, 2, 3. Important guests, family, close friends. We kept walking, past the main seating area, past the dance floor, until we reached a corner near the service entrance. There, tucked between a large potted plant and 2 industrial-sized trash cans, sat a small round table with a single chair. No tablecloth, no centerpiece, just a folding chair that looked like it had been borrowed from a church basement. "Here you are," the woman said, her voice artificially cheerful. "We had some last-minute adjustments to accommodate everyone." I stared at the setup, my throat tightening. The smell of garbage mixed with the scent of expensive perfume drifting from the main seating area. From where I sat, I could barely see the altar where my daughter would soon stand. But I could see the back of heads, the important people who mattered enough to sit at real tables. "There must be a mistake," I said quietly. "I'm the father of the bride." The woman's expression shifted, and I caught something cold in her eyes. "I'm sorry, sir, but these arrangements were specifically requested by the groom's family. They felt that certain. Accommodations needed to be made." Before I could respond, I heard a familiar laugh. Darren's mother, Patricia, emerged from behind a floral arrangement with 2 other women I didn't recognize. They were all dressed in clothes that cost more than I made in 6 months, their jewelry catching the light like tiny stars. "Oh, Carlton," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I see you found your seat. We thought it would be best to place you somewhere comfortable, away from the main festivities." "Away from my daughter's wedding?" The words came out harder than I intended. Patricia's perfectly painted lips formed a thin smile. "Now, Carlton, let's not make this difficult. We simply can't have." She paused, looking me up and down, certain elements affecting the tone of such an elegant event. "Your presence near the main tables might make our guests uncomfortable." One of the women beside her, a redhead with diamond earrings that probably cost more than my car, leaned in. "The photographs alone would be embarrassing. This is a $500,000 wedding, not a community potluck." The third woman nodded in agreement. "Patricia's right. We have senators and CEOs here tonight. Image matters." I felt my face burn with shame and anger. These women were talking about me like I wasn't standing right there, like I was some unwanted piece of furniture they needed to hide. But what hurt most was the silence from behind me. I turned and saw Jovi, my daughter, standing near the bridal party table in her stunning white gown. She was looking directly at me, had heard every word. Our eyes met for a moment, and I waited for her to say something, to defend her father, to tell these women they were wrong. Instead, she looked away and began adjusting her veil. "Jovi," I called out, my voice cracking slightly. She glanced back at me, and for a second, I saw something in her eyes. Maybe guilt, maybe embarrassment. "Dad, please don't make a scene. This is my special day." Those words hit me like a physical blow. My special day. 26 years ago, when her mother died giving birth to her, I promised I would give this little girl everything I could. I worked double shifts, missed meals, wore the same clothes for years so she could have dance lessons, college tuition, everything she needed to become the successful marketing executive she was today. And now, on her special day, I was an embarrassment to be hidden away. Patricia clapped her hands together as if the matter was settled. "Wonderful. Now that we have that sorted, Carlton, the ceremony will begin in about 30 minutes. You have a lovely view from here, really. And don't worry about dinner. We've arranged for you to receive a plate from the kitchen staff." The kitchen staff, like I was help, not family. I lowered myself into the folding chair, the metal cold even through my suit jacket. Around me, the ballroom filled with laughter and conversation. I watched as Darren's family greeted their guests with warm hugs and air kisses. Politicians, business owners, people whose names I'd seen in the newspaper. They all belonged here in a way I never would. A server walked past, carrying a tray of champagne glasses, each one sparkling like liquid gold. She paused near the trash cans to adjust her tray, and I caught her eye. There was sympathy there, the kind of look working people give each other when they recognize their own. "Can I get you anything, sir?" she whispered. "Just water, please," I managed. She nodded and hurried away, probably afraid of being seen talking to the man relegated to sit with the garbage. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photos I'd saved, pictures of Jovi growing up. Her first day of school, high school graduation, college acceptance letter. In every photo, she was smiling, happy, surrounded by the life I'd worked so hard to give her. When had I become something she was ashamed of? The irony wasn't lost on me. For 26 years, I'd cleaned offices in this very building. I knew every corner, every closet, every secret these people thought they kept hidden. I'd emptied their trash cans, vacuumed their floors, and made their world spotless while they pretended I didn't exist. Now, at my own daughter's wedding, I was still invisible, still seen as nothing more than the help. But as I sat there, surrounded by the smell of expensive flowers and cheap disrespect, I had no idea that everything was about to change. I had no idea that someone in this room knew exactly who I was, and that my past was about to collide with my present in ways I never could have imagined. The string quartet began to play, signaling that the ceremony was about to begin. From my corner table next to the trash, I prepared to watch my daughter marry into a family that saw me as garbage. I just didn't know yet that someone was watching me too. The ceremony had been beautiful, I had to admit. Even from my corner next to the trash cans, I could see Jovi glowing as she walked down the aisle. For a moment, watching her in that flowing white gown, I forgot about the humiliation and just felt pride. This was my little girl, the baby I'd rocked to sleep when she had nightmares, the toddler who used to climb on my shoulders to reach the cookie jar. But reality crashed back when the photographer started arranging family photos. I stood up, straightening my tie, expecting to be called forward. Instead, I watched as Darren's extended family gathered around the happy couple. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, everyone except me. The photographer directed them into various poses while I remained frozen by my table, invisible. "Just the immediate family now," the photographer called out. Jovi glanced in my direction, and for a heartbeat, I thought she would include me. But Patricia stepped forward, placing a manicured hand on the photographer's arm. "That's perfect as it is," she said firmly. "We have everyone we need." The message was clear. I wasn't immediate family. I wasn't family at all. I sank back into my folding chair, my chest tight with a pain that went deeper than embarrassment. Around me, the reception was beginning. Servers in crisp uniforms carried silver trays loaded with appetizers that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Crystal glasses clinked, and laughter echoed through the ballroom as guests found their assigned tables. Real tables, with real chairs and tablecloths and centerpieces. I picked at the plain dinner roll that had been brought to me on a paper plate, apparently my dinner from the kitchen staff that Patricia had mentioned. The roll was day-old at best, hard around the edges. I took a small bite and watched as the main tables were served what looked like filet mignon and lobster. "Quite a party, isn't it?" The voice came from directly behind me. I turned and saw a man in an impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit. He was probably in his early 70s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His suit alone probably cost more than my entire annual clothing budget. I'd spent enough time around wealthy people to recognize quality when I saw it. "Yes, it is," I replied carefully, wondering if this was another of Darren's relatives come to make sure I stayed in my designated corner. The man stepped closer, and I noticed he moved with the confident posture of someone accustomed to being heard and respected. His shoes were Italian leather, his watch was a vintage Rolex, and his cufflinks caught the light like tiny mirrors. "I couldn't help but notice you sitting here alone," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't quite place. "Mind if I ask why you're not at one of the main tables?" I felt my cheeks burn with fresh shame. "I'm the bride's father. This is where they seated me." The man's expression shifted, his eyebrows drawing together in something that looked like recognition mixed with disbelief. He glanced toward the main tables, then back at me, studying my face with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Carlton," he said quietly. "Carlton Miller?" My blood ran cold. How did this stranger know my name? I nodded slowly, trying to place his face. There was something familiar about him, but I couldn't quite grasp it. "My God," he breathed, shaking his head. "After all these years." And before I could ask what he meant, He looked around the ballroom, his gaze settling on Patricia and her group of well-dressed friends, who were now watching us with obvious curiosity and growing concern. The man leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Listen to me very carefully, Carlton. I need you to act like you're with me, like we're old friends catching up. Can you do that?" "I don't understand. Trust me," he said urgently. "Just follow my lead." Without waiting for my response, he straightened up and extended his hand with a broad smile. "Carlton Miller, I can't believe it's really you. How long has it been?" Confused but desperate for any escape from my humiliation, I stood and shook his hand. "It's been a while," I managed. "Too long, my friend, too long." The man's voice carried across the nearby tables, drawing attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called out, addressing the curious onlookers, "I'd like you to meet one of the finest men I've ever had the honor of knowing, Carlton Miller." I saw Patricia's face go pale. Darren, who had been laughing with his groomsmen, stopped mid-sentence and turned toward us. Even Jovi looked up from her conversation with the bridesmaids, her expression confused. The stranger, though something told me he wasn't really a stranger, continued with enthusiasm that seemed completely genuine. "Carlton, you must come sit at my table. I insist. We have so much to catch up on." "Oh, that's not necessary," Patricia interjected, hurrying over with her fake smile plastered in place. "Carlton is perfectly comfortable where he is. Aren't you, Carlton?" The man turned to Patricia, and I watched as his warm expression cooled into something that could freeze champagne. "I'm sorry, and you are?" "Patricia Ashworth," she said, extending her hand with the confidence of someone used to her name opening doors. "Mother of the groom. This is my son Darren's wedding." "Ah," the man said, taking her hand briefly. "Well, Patricia, I'm Marcus Chen, and Carlton here is an old friend of mine, a very dear friend." Patricia's smile wavered slightly. The name Marcus Chen clearly meant something to her, though I had no idea what. Her eyes darted between Marcus and me as if trying to solve a puzzle. "Mr. Chen," she said carefully, "I had no idea Carlton had such distinguished connections." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Really? That's surprising, considering he's the father of the bride. Surely his distinguished connections would be well known to the groom's family." The emphasis he placed on father of the bride wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. I watched as several guests at nearby tables began to whisper among themselves, glancing between my corner table next to the trash and the obvious confusion on Patricia's face. "Of course," Patricia stammered. "We just thought Carlton would be more comfortable in a quieter area of the reception." "Next to the garbage cans?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by the surrounding tables. "How thoughtful." The color drained completely from Patricia's face. Darren appeared at his mother's side, his expression tight with barely controlled panic. "Mr. Chen," Darren said, extending his hand. "I'm Darren Ashworth. What a pleasure to meet you." Marcus shook Darren's hand but didn't return the smile. "The pleasure is mine, I'm sure. Though I have to say, I'm quite surprised by the seating arrangements. In my experience, the father of the bride typically sits at the head table." "There was a mix-up with the place cards," Darren said quickly. "We'll fix this right away." "No need," Marcus replied smoothly. "Carlton will be sitting at my table, won't you, old friend?" I looked at this man who claimed to know me. This perfectly dressed stranger who had appeared like an answer to a prayer I hadn't even known I was praying. There was kindness in his eyes, but also something else, a strength that suggested he wasn't someone to be crossed. "I'd be honored," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. As Marcus led me away from my corner of shame, I caught sight of Jovi. She was staring at us with an expression I couldn't read, surprise, confusion, and maybe something that looked like regret. For the first time all evening she was really looking at me, seeing me. But it was too late for that now. Whatever game Marcus was playing, whatever reason he had for rescuing me from my humiliation, I was grateful. Because for the first time since I'd walked into this ballroom, I felt like a human being instead of garbage to be hidden away. I just had no idea that Marcus Chen knew exactly who I was, and that my past was about to catch up with me in ways that would change everything. Marcus led me to a table near the front of the ballroom, one of the premium spots I'd watched other guests claim with the casual confidence of people who belonged. The table was set for 8, with crisp white linens, crystal stemware, and a centerpiece of white orchids that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. As we approached, the other guests already seated looked up with polite curiosity. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Carlton Miller," Marcus announced as he pulled out a chair for me. "Carlton, these are some colleagues of mine." I found myself sitting between Marcus and a woman who introduced herself as Dr. Sarah Whitman, a cardiologist at Johns Hopkins. Across from me was a federal judge, a tech entrepreneur, and a couple who owned a chain of luxury hotels. These were the kind of people who usually looked through me when I was cleaning their offices after hours. So Carlton, Dr. Whitman said as servers began placing plates of what looked like salmon with some kind of sauce in front of us. How do you know Marcus? I glanced at Marcus, still trying to understand what was happening. He was cutting his salmon with practiced ease, but I caught him watching me carefully. That's actually quite a story, Marcus said before I could answer. Carlton and I go way back, don't we, my friend? There was something in his tone, a weight that suggested this wasn't just polite conversation. I nodded, though I still couldn't place him. The face was familiar now that I really looked at it, but I couldn't pin down where or when. How far back? The judge asked, clearly interested. Marcus set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. 1971, a place called Firebase Charlie, about 20 miles north of Saigon. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Vietnam. Suddenly the familiar features clicked into place, though the face I remembered had been 20 years younger, thinner, covered in jungle mud and terror. Marcus Chen, I whispered, the memory flooding back. Private First Class Chen. He smiled, and now I could see the scared kid he'd been, hiding behind 50 years of success and confidence. Sergeant Miller, though I think we can skip the rank formalities after all this time. The other guests at the table had gone quiet, sensing they were witnessing something significant. Dr. Whitman leaned forward slightly. You served together? Carlton saved my life, Marcus said simply. More than once, actually. I felt my face flush. I was just doing my job. No, Marcus said firmly. You were doing much more than that. The memories were coming back now, sharp and clear despite the decades that had passed. Marcus had been barely 18 when he arrived in our unit, a scared kid from San Francisco's Chinatown who'd been drafted straight out of high school. He'd been assigned to my squad, and I'd taken him under my wing the way older soldiers did with the new guys if they wanted them to survive. Tell them about the bridge, Marcus said quietly. I shook my head. Marcus, they don't want to hear old war stories. I do, Dr. Whitman said. Please. Marcus looked at me expectantly. When I didn't speak, he continued. We were on patrol, crossing this river on what was basically a rope bridge. Carlton was leading. I was behind him. The bridge gave way. I could still feel the sensation of the rope snapping under my hands, the sickening drop toward the muddy water below. But worse was hearing Marcus cry out behind me, knowing he'd fallen too. The current was strong, I said quietly, the words coming despite myself. Marcus got tangled in the rope. He was going under. The water was freezing and there were sniper positions on both banks, Marcus added. Carlton could have made it to shore safely. Instead, he dove back in for me. The hotel owner's wife gasped softly. In the middle of a war zone? He pulled me out. Marcus continued, carried me to shore while bullets were hitting the water around us. Then he performed CPR until I came around. I remembered that too, the desperate chest compressions, breathing air into lungs that seemed to have given up, praying to a God I wasn't sure was listening that this kid wouldn't die on my watch. That's not the only time either, Marcus said, his voice growing emotional. 3 months later, during the Tet Offensive, our position got overrun. Carlton organized the evacuation, made sure everyone got out. He stayed behind to cover our retreat. Marcus, I said uncomfortably. It was a long time ago. Not to me, he replied. I've thought about you every day for 53 years, Carlton. I tried to find you after the war, but you disappeared. That was true. When I came home from Vietnam, I didn't want parades or recognition. I just wanted to forget, to blend into civilian life and never think about firefights and body counts again. I'd settled in a small town, taken whatever jobs I could find, and tried to build something normal. I joined my father's import business when I got back, Marcus continued. Small operation, mostly dealing with restaurants in Chinatown. But I couldn't stop thinking about the men I'd served with, especially you. So I started a foundation to help veterans, and the business grew from there. Dr. Whitman looked impressed. What kind of business is it now? Marcus smiled modestly. Chen Global Industries. We deal in international shipping, logistics, some real estate development. I nearly choked on my salmon. Chen Global Industries wasn't just any company. It was one of the largest privately held corporations in the country. I'd seen their logo on buildings, ships, even the sides of trucks. If Marcus was telling the truth, he was worth billions. I never forgot what you did for me, Carlton, Marcus said, his voice intense now. I built everything I have on the foundation of the life you saved. I've been looking for you for decades. But how did you find me here? I asked. Marcus smiled and pulled out his phone, scrolling to what looked like a news article. Your daughter's engagement was announced in the San Francisco Chronicle 6 months ago. The article mentioned that the bride's father, Carlton Miller, was a Vietnam veteran who worked as a building maintenance supervisor. It took some digging, but I tracked down your service record. When I saw you were in my old unit, I knew it had to be you. My heart was pounding. You came here because you saw a newspaper announcement. I flew in from Hong Kong yesterday specifically for this wedding, Marcus said. I had to know if it was really you. I had to finally say thank you. The other guests at the table were staring at me with new eyes. The judge leaned forward. So you're a decorated war hero? I'm not a hero, I said automatically. I just did what needed to be done. Bronze Star, Silver Star, Purple Heart, Marcus rattled off. I looked up your service record, Carlton. You were recommended for the Medal of Honor after the TED action, but the paperwork got lost in the chaos. I had to set down my fork because my hands were shaking. All around us, the wedding reception continued. Laughter, clinking glasses, the string quartet playing something classical. But at our table, something profound was happening, something I'd never expected. Why didn't you ever claim the recognition you deserved? Dr. Whitman asked gently. I thought about how to answer that. How to explain that coming home from that war felt like stepping through a doorway into a world that didn't want to hear about what we'd done or seen. How I'd just wanted to disappear into normal life. To be a regular person with a regular job who didn't have to think about the weight of other people's lives in his hands. I had a daughter to raise, I said finally. That seemed more important than medals. Marcus nodded slowly. Jovi, she's beautiful, Carlton. You must be very proud. I glanced across the ballroom to where Jovi was laughing with her new husband, surrounded by his family and their wealthy friends. She looked happy, radiant even. But she also looked like a stranger, someone who belonged in this world of crystal and silk in a way I never would. I am proud, I said, though the words felt hollow now. Then why? Marcus asked, his voice dropping low so only our table could hear. Are you sitting at what amounts to the servants' table while she celebrates with people who clearly don't respect you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Around us, the other guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing they were witnessing something private and painful. It's complicated, I said. Marcus studied my face for a long moment. No, Carlton, it's not complicated at all. It's wrong. As if summoned by our conversation, I saw Patricia approaching our table, her face pale but determined. Behind her trailed Darren and two men I didn't recognize, probably more family members trying to figure out what was happening. Mr. Chen, Patricia said when she reached us, her voice carefully controlled. I hope you're enjoying the reception. I wanted to apologize again for the earlier confusion about the seating arrangements. Marcus stood slowly, his movements deliberate. At his full height, he commanded attention in a way that made everyone nearby fall silent. Mrs. Ashworth, he said formally, I think we need to have a conversation. Patricia forced another one of her practiced smiles, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Of course, Mr. Chen. What can I do for you? Marcus gestured to Carlton, who was still seated, looking between them with a mixture of confusion and growing unease. I'm curious about how you came to seat the father of the bride next to the garbage cans. The words carried across the nearby tables, and I watched as several guests turned to stare. Patricia's smile became even more strained. As I mentioned, there was a misunderstanding with the place cards, she said, her voice tight. Really? Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled through what looked like photos. Because I have screenshots of the seating chart that was posted on your wedding website 3 weeks ago. Carlton was originally seated at table 1, next to the bridal party. His name was moved to that corner spot sometime in the last week. Patricia's face went white. Darren stepped forward, clearly trying to take control of the situation. Mr. Chen, with all due respect, this is a family matter. You're absolutely right, Marcus interrupted. It is a family matter. The question is why a family would treat a man like Carlton with such disrespect. Dr. Whitman leaned forward slightly. I'm sorry, but what exactly makes Carlton so special? Besides his war service, of course. Marcus turned back to Carlton, who was gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles had gone white. Carlton, do you remember what you did after the war, when you came home? Carlton nodded slowly. I worked construction for a while. Then I got a job at the shipyard in Oakland. Tell them what you did at the shipyard. Carlton looked uncomfortable. I was a welder. Worked on military contracts mostly. What kind of military contracts? Marcus pressed gently. Ship repairs, some new construction. We did a lot of work on the new guided missile systems they were installing. Marcus smiled. Carlton is being modest. He wasn't just any welder. He was a specialist in underwater welding, one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. The Navy specifically requested him for their most critical projects because of his precision and reliability. The judge looked impressed. That's highly specialized work. It is, Marcus agreed. But that's not the most important part. Carlton, tell them about Jovi's mother. Carlton's expression softened, and for a moment he looked lost in memory. Sarah was a nurse at the VA hospital. We met when I was getting treatment for my back injury from the war. She was dying when you met her, wasn't she? Marcus said gently. Carlton nodded, his voice barely audible. Lupus. She'd been fighting it for years. The doctor said she had maybe 2 years left, but she wanted children. Marcus continued. More than anything, she said she didn't care about the time she had left. She just wanted to be a mother, even if it was only for a little while. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. I don't see what this has to do with everything, Marcus said sharply. Carlton, Tell them what you did. Carlton was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I married her. We had Jovi. Sarah died 3 weeks after the birth from complications. He was 26 years old, Marcus said to the table. A decorated war veteran with a dangerous but well-paying job, and he gave it all up to raise a newborn daughter as a single father. Dr. Whitman gasped softly. You left the shipyard? Carlton nodded. The hours were too long, and the travel was constant. I couldn't leave a baby with sitters all the time. So I found work that let me be home every night. Janitorial work, mostly. Night shift so I could be with Jovi during the day. For 26 years, Marcus added. Carlton worked as a janitor not because he couldn't do anything else, but because it was the only job that let him be the father Jovi needed. The silence at our table was deafening. Around us, the reception continued, but I could see people at nearby tables straining to hear our conversation. Patricia cleared her throat. That's very noble. But I still don't understand why this changes anything about the seating arrangements. Marcus turned to face her fully, and his expression was colder than anything I'd seen from him so far. Because, Mrs. Ashworth, you've spent this entire evening treating a genuine American hero like he was trash, simply because he works an honest job to support his family. We didn't know about his military service, Darren said quickly. You didn't ask. Marcus replied. You made assumptions based on his job and his clothes, and you decided he wasn't good enough to sit with your friends. Carlton stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. Marcus, please, this isn't necessary. Yes, it is, Marcus said firmly. Carlton, you saved my life 53 years ago. I built an empire worth $12 billion, and I owe every bit of it to you. If you hadn't pulled me out of that river, none of it would exist. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. $12 billion. I saw Patricia's jaw drop slightly. But more than that, Marcus continued, you raised a daughter who became successful in her own right. You sacrificed everything to give her opportunities you never had. And this is how she repays you. By allowing her new in-laws to treat you like garbage? For the first time since the conversation started, I looked toward Jovi. She was standing near the cake table, but she was clearly listening to everything. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking slightly as she gripped her champagne glass. Jovi didn't know, Carlton said quietly. She was protecting her new family. From what? Marcus asked. From associating with her own father? Carlton was quiet for a long moment. You have to understand, Marcus. Jovi grew up poor. Not just regular poor, but really poor. Hand-me-down clothes, generic cereal, apartments where the heat didn't always work. She worked so hard to get out of that life, to build something better. And you worked 3 jobs to help her do it, Marcus said. I looked into your background, Carlton. You worked as a janitor 40 hours a week, did weekend maintenance at a church, and delivered newspapers every morning for 12 years just to pay for her college. Dr. Whitman shook her head in amazement. You put her through college working 3 jobs. State school, Carlton said. But she got her MBA, got a good job, started making real money. She deserved better than what I could give her growing up. So she's ashamed of where she came from, the judge said quietly. Carlton's face crumpled slightly. She's not ashamed. She's just moved on. This is her world now, and I don't fit in it. That's not your fault, Marcus said firmly. That's a choice she made. Patricia had been growing more agitated throughout the conversation. Mr. Chen, I appreciate your friendship with Carlton, but you're making our guests uncomfortable. Perhaps we could continue this conversation privately. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Actually, Mrs. Ashworth, I think everyone should hear this, especially since you seem so concerned about the image this wedding projects. He pulled out his phone again. I had my assistant do some research on your family after I arrived today. Your husband's construction company has been struggling for the past 5 years, hasn't it? 3 major contracts canceled, several lawsuits from subcontractors who weren't paid. Patricia's face went ashen. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Your family is in debt to the tune of approximately $2 million. This wedding alone cost $500,000 you don't have, all charged to credit cards and loans secured against properties you're about to lose. Darren stepped forward, his face red with anger. How dare you investigate my family? Who do you think you are? Marcus stood to his full height, and suddenly the friendly businessman disappeared, replaced by someone who commanded boardrooms and controlled billions of dollars. I'm Marcus Chen, CEO of Chen Global Industries. And your father owes my subsidiary companies approximately $600,000 in unpaid construction contracts from last year. The color drained from Darren's face. We didn't know Chen Global was your company. Of course you didn't. You don't do your homework. Just like you didn't bother to learn anything about the man whose daughter you married. Marcus turned back to Carlton. This entire wedding is financed on debt and pretense, Carlton. They're not wealthy. They're desperate. And they treated you like garbage because they needed to feel superior to someone. Carlton sat down heavily, as if the weight of everything was finally hitting him. I don't understand. If they're having money problems, why spend so much on the wedding? Because appearances matter more to them than truth, Marcus said. They'd rather go bankrupt, pretending to be something they're not, than admit they need help. I watched as Patricia and Darren exchanged panicked glances. Around us, the other guests at nearby tables were openly staring now, clearly having heard enough to understand that something significant was happening. "There's one more thing, Carlton," Marcus said gently. "Something I think you should know about your daughter." Carlton looked up, and I could see fear in his eyes. "What?" Marcus hesitated, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked uncertain. "Maybe this isn't the time or place." "Tell me," Carlton said firmly. Marcus sighed. "Jovi called my office 3 months ago. She somehow found out I'd been looking for you and wanted to meet with me." Carlton's face went white. "What did she want?" "She wanted to make sure I wouldn't interfere with her wedding or her new life. She offered to give me your contact information if I promised to leave her alone afterward." The words hit Carlton like a physical blow. She knew you were looking for me? She knew I'd been trying to track you down for years. She knew about our military service together, and she decided not to tell you because she was afraid I might embarrass her in front of her new family." Carlton buried his face in his hands, and for a moment I thought he might break down completely. But when he looked up, his expression had changed. The defeated man who'd been sitting next to the trash cans was gone, replaced by someone I was finally beginning to recognize. The sergeant who'd saved lives in Vietnam, the father who'd sacrificed everything for his daughter, the man who'd survived decades of thankless work with his dignity intact. "Marcus," he said quietly, "I think it's time I had a conversation with my daughter." The moment I stood up from that table, I felt something shift inside me. It was like waking up from a long, terrible dream where I'd forgotten who I was. Marcus rose beside me, but I held up a hand. "I need to do this alone," I said. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'll be right here if you need me." I walked across the ballroom, my steps steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. The conversations around me seemed to fade as I approached the area where Jovi stood with her bridesmaids. She was laughing at something one of them had said, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing toward our table. "Jovi," I said quietly. She turned, and for a split second, I saw the little girl who used to run to me when she had nightmares. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by the guarded expression I'd been seeing more and more over the past few years. "Dad, please don't make a scene," she said, her voice low. "This is my wedding day." "I know exactly what day it is," I replied. "It's the day my daughter got married, and I was seated next to the garbage because her new family thought I was an embarrassment." Her friends shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing they were witnessing something private. Jovi glanced at them, then back at me. "Can we talk somewhere private?" she asked. "No," I said firmly. "We've been private long enough." "Jovi, did you know Marcus Chen was looking for me?" The color drained from her face, and I had my answer before she even spoke. "Dad, I can explain." 3 months ago, I continued, my voice carrying enough that nearby guests began to turn. "You knew that one of my closest friends from Vietnam, a man who's apparently worth $12 billion, was trying to find me, and you decided not to tell me." Jovi's bridesmaids exchanged shocked glances. One of them whispered something about billions of dollars, but I kept my focus on my daughter. "It wasn't like that," Jovi said, her voice shaking. "I was protecting our family." "Whose family?" I asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you chose their family over yours a long time ago." Patricia appeared at Jovi's shoulder, clearly trying to do damage control. "Carlton, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "Mrs. Ashworth," I said without looking at her, "your opinion is no longer relevant to me. This is between me and my daughter." "Dad, please," Jovi said, tears starting to form in her eyes. "You don't understand what it's been like." "Then help me understand," I said. "Help me understand how the little girl I raised, the one I worked 3 jobs to put through college, turned into someone who could watch her father be humiliated and say nothing." "I didn't know they were going to seat you there," she said quickly. "I had nothing to do with that." "But you didn't stop it either," I pointed out. "When you saw where they put me, when you heard Patricia talking about how my poverty would embarrass their guests, you stayed silent." Jovi looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route. The ballroom had grown quieter, with more and more guests turning to watch our conversation. "You're embarrassing me," she whispered. "I'm embarrassing you?" I felt a bitter laugh escape my throat. "Jovi, I spent 26 years making sure you never had to be embarrassed by anything. I wore the same clothes for years so you could have new ones. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day so you could have hot meals. I worked nights so I could take you to school every morning and help with your homework every evening." "I know," she said, tears flowing freely now. "I know you sacrificed for me." "Then why?" My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay strong. "Why was it so easy for you to let them treat me like I was nothing? Jovi glanced at Darren, who was standing a few feet away, looking like he wanted to disappear. Because I wanted to fit in, she said quietly. For once in my life, I wanted to be part of something elegant and beautiful and normal. Normal? I stared at her. Jovi, what we had was normal. A father working to provide for his daughter, a family that loved each other despite not having much money. That's the most normal thing in the world. You don't understand, she said, her voice rising. Do you know what it was like growing up? Having to shop at thrift stores, living in apartments where the neighbors fought all night, never being able to invite friends over because I was ashamed of where we lived. Her words hit me like physical blows. You were ashamed of our life? Not of you, she said quickly. Never of you. But yes, I was ashamed of being poor. I was ashamed of having generic clothes and generic food and a generic life where nothing was ever special or beautiful or worthy of admiration. I looked at this woman in her expensive wedding dress, surrounded by flowers that cost more than I made in a month, and I barely recognized her. So you decided to erase all of that, I said slowly. You decided to pretend you came from somewhere else. Someone else. I worked hard to build a better life, she said defensively. There's nothing wrong with wanting more than what you grew up with. There's nothing wrong with wanting more, I agreed. But there's everything wrong with being ashamed of where you came from. And there's everything wrong with letting people who don't know you or me decide that we're not good enough for their world. Marcus appeared beside me, and I realized he'd been listening. Jovi, he said gently, may I ask you something? She nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. Do you know what your father did in Vietnam? He was a soldier, she said uncertainly. He saved my life, Marcus said simply, and the lives of 6 other men in our unit. He's a decorated war hero who came home and chose to be a father instead of chasing glory or money. The man you're ashamed of is one of the finest human beings I've ever known. Jovi looked between Marcus and me, confusion and guilt warring on her face. And do you know what he gave up for you? Marcus continued. He was offered a job with my company in 1975. Good money, excellent benefits, opportunity for advancement. He turned it down because the position required travel, and he didn't want to leave you with babysitters. I stared at Marcus. You offered me a job. Several times over the years, he said. I kept track of you as best I could. Every time my investigators found you, I'd have HR reach out with an offer. You turned down positions that would have made you wealthy, Carlton, because you chose being a father over building a career. Jovi's face had gone white. Dad, you never told me about job offers. Because they didn't matter, I said. You mattered. Raising you mattered. Making sure you had everything you needed mattered more than anything some company could offer me. But we were so poor, she whispered. We were poor in money, I said. We were rich in everything that actually counts, or at least I thought we were. The ballroom around us had gone almost completely silent. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. I could see Darren's family huddled together, their faces pale as they realized their carefully orchestrated evening was falling apart. I never asked you to be ashamed of me, Jovi, I continued. I never asked you to hide who you were or where you came from. I just asked you to remember that love and family are worth more than money and status. I do remember, she said, her voice breaking. But I also remember being hungry sometimes, and cold, and feeling like everyone else had things we could never afford. And now you have everything you wanted, I said, looking around at the opulent ballroom. Was it worth it? Was this wedding, this family, this world you bought into worth sitting by while they treated your father like garbage? She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came out. Marcus stepped forward. Jovi, your father is my oldest friend and the person I owe my life to. I came here tonight to honor him, to finally repay a debt I've carried for 53 years. What I found instead was a man being treated with contempt by people who aren't worthy to shine his shoes. He turned to address the crowd that had gathered. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet Carlton Miller, decorated Vietnam veteran, Bronze Star recipient, a man who saved lives in war and then came home to raise his daughter as a single father. He worked multiple jobs for decades, sacrificed his own comfort and opportunities, all to ensure his child had a chance at a better life. The applause started slowly, from Dr. Whitman and the judge at our table. But it spread, growing stronger as more guests joined in. I saw tears in some eyes, shame in others. Patricia and her family stood frozen, clearly understanding that the narrative of the evening had shifted completely away from their control. And tonight, Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom, this remarkable man was seated next to the garbage cans because his daughter's new family decided he wasn't good enough for their society wedding. The applause died abruptly, replaced by murmurs of shock and disapproval. I saw several guests looking at Patricia and Darren with obvious disgust. Jovi was crying openly now, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." But I was looking at her, really looking at her, and I realized something that broke my heart all over again. She wasn't sorry about what had happened. She was sorry she'd been caught. She was sorry that her carefully constructed new life was being exposed for what it really was. "Jovi," I said quietly, "I love you. I will always love you. But I can't be part of this anymore." I turned and walked away, leaving my daughter in her beautiful dress, surrounded by her beautiful things, in her beautiful life that had no room in it for the man who'd made it all possible. 6 months later, I was sitting on the back porch of my new house, watching the sunrise over Lake Tahoe. The house wasn't huge, but it was mine, really mine, not rented, not borrowed, not dependent on anyone else's charity or goodwill. Marcus had insisted on helping me buy it after everything that happened at the wedding, though he'd been smart enough to phrase it as a delayed payment for services rendered in Vietnam. The morning was quiet except for the gentle lapping of water against the shore and the occasional call of a loon. I had my coffee, my newspaper, and for the first time in 26 years, I had peace. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. A text message from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was from. They'd been coming every few days for months now. "Dad, please call me. I want to make things right. Jovi." I set the phone down without responding, just as I had with all the others. Some wounds needed time to heal, and some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt with just words. The sound of a car in my driveway interrupted my thoughts. I looked up to see Marcus's black sedan pulling up to the house. He'd taken to stopping by whenever his business brought him to the West Coast, which seemed to be happening more frequently these days. "Morning, Carlton," he called out as he emerged from the car, carrying what looked like a bakery box and 2 cups of coffee. "You know I can make my own coffee," I said, but I was smiling. "Not like this you can't," he replied, climbing the porch steps. "This is from a little place in San Francisco's Chinatown, same neighborhood where I grew up." He handed me one of the cups and opened the box to reveal fresh pastries. For a few minutes we sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher over the mountains. "How's the job search going?" Marcus asked eventually. I'd been looking for work, something to do with my days now that I wasn't sending most of my paycheck to support someone else's dreams. "Got an offer yesterday, actually. The local VA hospital needs a maintenance supervisor. It's part-time, but it'll keep me busy. Working with veterans." Marcus nodded approvingly. "That sounds perfect for you." "Feels right," I agreed. "Helping people who understand what service means." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his phone. "I got an interesting call yesterday, from a reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle." I felt my stomach tighten. "What kind of call?" "The kind where they want to do a story about what happened at the wedding. Apparently, word has gotten around about Patricia and Darren's financial situation. Their construction company filed for bankruptcy last week, and several of their creditors are talking to journalists about the lavish wedding they threw while owing millions in unpaid bills." I sighed. I'd been dreading this. The wedding had become the talk of San Francisco's social circles, especially after several guests posted about it on social media. The story of the war hero father seated next to the garbage had spread, along with details about the groom's family's financial troubles. "They want to interview you," Marcus continued. "Get your side of the story." "I'm not interested," I said immediately. "I figured you'd say that. That's why I told them no on your behalf." I looked at him gratefully. "Thank you. But Carlton," he said seriously, "you should know that Jovi called me yesterday too." My chest tightened. What did she want? "She's getting divorced." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though part of me had been expecting them. "How long?" "She filed papers 3 weeks ago. Apparently, when Darren's family lost everything, the marriage fell apart pretty quickly. She's been trying to reach you because she wants to come home." "This isn't her home," I said quietly. Marcus studied my face. "Carlton, she's your daughter. She's a grown woman who made her choices," I replied. "I spent her entire childhood teaching her that family loyalty matters, that you don't abandon the people who love you when something shinier comes along. She chose to ignore those lessons. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Marcus. A mistake is forgetting to call on my birthday or not sending a Christmas card. This was a deliberate choice to value money and status over the man who raised her." I took a sip of my coffee, tasting the bitter reality of those words. She sat there and watched them humiliate me. She knew they were treating me like garbage, and she said nothing because she was afraid it would embarrass her in front of her new rich friends. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "What if she's learned from it? What if losing everything taught her what really matters? Then I'm happy for her," I said. "But I'm not going to be her safety net anymore. I'm not going to be the person she runs back to when her other plans fall apart." "That seems harsh." I turned to look at Marcus directly. Is it? For 26 years, I was her father, her provider, her constant support. The moment she didn't need me anymore, the moment she found people she thought were better than me, she was ready to erase me from her life entirely. You told me yourself. She knew you were looking for me and chose not to tell me because she was afraid I'd embarrass her. Marcus nodded slowly. I remember. So now she's learned that money doesn't buy happiness, that shallow people make poor friends, that a marriage based on status instead of love doesn't last. Good for her. But I'm not going to pretend that watching your father be treated like garbage at your own wedding is something you can apologize away. A loon called across the lake, its voice echoing off the water. I watched the ripples spread outward from where it had been, thinking about how some actions created waves that never really stopped. I saw Patricia last week, Marcus said quietly. How? She came to my office in San Francisco. Wanted to discuss the debt her family owes my companies. I raised an eyebrow. And? She asked if there was any way the debt could be forgiven, given the family's connection to you. I actually laughed at that. The family's connection to me? You mean the connection where they treated me like hired help at my own daughter's wedding? That's essentially what I told her, Marcus said with a slight smile, though perhaps more diplomatically. What did she say? She offered to arrange a meeting between you and Jovi. Said she was sure that if you just talked to your daughter, you could work things out and then perhaps the business debt could be reconsidered. The audacity of it left me speechless for a moment. She wanted to use my relationship with my daughter as leverage to get out of paying money she legitimately owes? That was the general idea, yes. I shook my head in amazement. These people learned absolutely nothing. I got that impression too. We sat in silence for a while, watching a family of ducks paddle past the shoreline. The simplicity of it struck me. Parents leading their young, staying together, protecting each other. Natural loyalty that didn't require explanation or justification. Carlton, Marcus said eventually, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. I thought about it seriously, looking around at my small house, my quiet life, my peaceful mornings without the weight of other people's expectations. Yes, I said, and realized it was true. For the first time in years, I'm actually happy. Even without Jovi? Especially without Jovi, I said. Not because I don't love her, but because I'm not constantly worried about disappointing her or failing to live up to whatever image she has of what her life should be. I took a deep breath of the clean mountain air. For 26 years, I measured my success by whether I was providing enough for her, whether I was being a good enough father, whether I was making the right sacrifices. I never asked whether she was being a good enough daughter. And now? Now I'm just Carlton Miller, Vietnam veteran, maintenance worker, quiet guy who lives by the lake. No one expects anything from me except what I choose to give, and no one judges me except by my own actions. Marcus smiled. That sounds peaceful. It is. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jovi. This time I glanced at it. Dad, I know I hurt you. I know sorry isn't enough, but I'm ready to be the daughter you raised me to be. Please give me a chance. I showed the message to Marcus. He read it and looked up at me. What are you going to do? I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out over the lake. A fishing boat was making its way across the water, leaving a wake that caught the morning light. Nothing, I said finally. I'm going to do absolutely nothing. You're not going to respond. Marcus, I spent 26 years teaching her right from wrong, teaching her about loyalty and family and treating people with respect. If she hasn't learned those lessons by now, no conversation is going to teach them to her. I turned back to face him, and if she has learned them, then she'll understand why I can't just pretend that what happened at that wedding was okay. She'll understand that some betrayals cut too deep to heal with words. Marcus nodded slowly. So you're just going to let her go? I let her go a long time ago, I said. At the wedding, when I realized she'd chosen her new life over her old one. What I'm doing now is accepting that choice and moving on with my own life. And if she keeps trying to reach you, I thought about that, then eventually she'll stop. And maybe that's when she'll finally understand what she lost. Marcus finished his coffee and stood up. I should get going. Board meeting in 2 hours. Thanks for stopping by, I said, and thanks for the coffee. Carlton, he said as he reached the porch steps. You know you're always welcome to come work for me, right? I have operations all over the world, positions that would suit your skills and experience. I know, I said, and I appreciate it, but I like my life simple now. He smiled. I figured you'd say that, but the offer stands. After Marcus left, I sat back down with my newspaper and my cooling coffee. The morning was warming up and I could hear other residents of the lake community starting their days. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. A car door slammed. Normal sounds of normal people living normal lives. My phone buzzed one more time. I glanced at it, expecting another message from Jovi. Instead, it was from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Miller, this is Sarah Whitman. We met at the wedding. I wanted you to know that several of us who witnessed what happened have started a support group for veterans in the Bay Area. Would you be interested in helping us get it started? Your experience and perspective would be invaluable. I smiled and typed back, I'd be honored to help. Because that's what real family looked like. People who chose to be in your life, who valued what you had to offer, who saw your worth without needing to be convinced of it. I finished my coffee, folded my newspaper, and went inside to get ready for another quiet, peaceful day in the life I'd chosen for myself. Behind me, the lake stretched out toward the horizon, calm and endless and free.